Welcome to the show, everybody. You're listening to Leveling Up with Steve Fera. It's me. So this is a show presented by LevelHead Politics. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, LH Politics. And you can follow me on Twitter at SPFera26. Welcome to the show. Basically, what is this? This is a way to talk about the media, talk about what's going on, give you political commentary, while at the same time using a new model that we're creating. And this model is a form of media that is civil, honest, and fair. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, LevelHead Politics was created by a couple of guys, friends of mine, and our main goal in the future is to give you conservative commentary, mainly conservative, although we do offer views of the left and other ideologies. But we want to bring back civility. We want to bring back intellectual discussion. Okay, I see on Facebook, not only do I see a lot of people saying very dumb things, but I see it from both sides. And it's disconcerting because it's not... First off, both of them are wrong, and the exchange is not efficient. And it's in a time where we have such polarized politics, it's important that we stay level-headed. So this show I'm going to be doing once a week. It's going to be pre-taped and edited. It'll be available on SoundCloud, YouTube, and on our website. And it's a great way to give you guys the news and see what's up. I'm going to have some guests. I'm going to have... so this week I have... I'm going to talk to Angelo who's a friend of mine and a fellow student of mine at St. Joe's, and he's going to tell you all about the inauguration because he was there. And then I'm going to have on Alec, who's one of the co-founders of LHP, and we're just going to talk about the events that are unfolding over the past few days. So I'm going to give you my take on a couple things, and this is typically how the show's going to go. I'm just going to talk for 10 or 15 minutes or so, and then I'm going to have a couple guests, and then we'll close out. And I think it's a lot more efficient than writing tons of articles. I think it makes a lot more sense. You guys would prefer to have a more easily consumable source of media. And so right now we're only terrestrial, but we're growing. And so if you could support us, if you could share this podcast, if you could share our posts from LH Politics, share articles from our website, lhpolitics.com, we would be eternally grateful. I do have to have a plug in here for one thing. We are trying to generate some more revenue for our website, so we're going to be creating. We created a new ad campaign that is cheaper than Netflix. So I believe the price point is. I know it's $7 a month. I believe it's $70 a year. I want to say 70 or 75, I believe, which is still a great deal. 70 or 75 for the year. And what we will do is we will put a plug for your small business in this podcast, and we will put a nice big block ad on our website of your design. The plug is of your making. So contact us. You can DM me on Twitter. You can Facebook message LevelHead Politics, the page on Facebook, or contact me personally, and we can set that up for you. So we would love to have a relationship with your small business. Also, if you're a social media website or a social media page or account or a website, we would love to partner with you. We've already have a couple partnerships with other conservative sites, and we want to keep partnering up because in a time where conservative thought is in a couple ways being suppressed by social media, it's important that we all stick together. And I think Stephen Crowder once said that the pie is so huge, the pie meaning the base from which conservative media sources can thrive, because there's a lot of young conservatives out there. There's a lot of conservatives in general out there, especially after this election, that want to hear the news. I want to hear that are new to this ideology in some ways. And so we want to partner up with you. We want to build our base with you, and it would be great. So again, contact us through those different ways I mentioned, and we could set that up, because we have partnerships with, I'm going to have a plug right here, Alt Media Watch on Twitter. So go follow at Alt Media Watch, and you can see some great posts they're sharing. It's an anti-globalist Twitter handle, so check it out. Okay, so now the plugs are through, I'm going to talk about some stuff. I'm fairly conservative on most issues, so I try to be as even-handed as possible. So don't be alarmed if you're a liberal and you don't agree with something I say. In fact, I welcome it. So don't be afraid to comment. Don't be afraid to email me or send me a message. I absolutely welcome it. So before we have Angelo on, I want to talk about the Women's March, because it's kind of important to talk about. I think a lot of conservatives are bashing it too much. I think that at the end of the day, you have people that are out there protesting peacefully. I think it's a beautiful thing, regardless of whether or not you believe in what they say or agree with them. It's a beautiful thing that you have so many people peacefully protesting. And personally, I disagree with some of the messages that are being spread, but at the end of the day, I'm happy to live in a country where that's acceptable. I would not want to live in a country where, throwing a brick through a Starbucks or burning a limousine or burning a small business to the ground is ethical or allowed. I would never want to live in a country like that. So things like the Women's March make me proud to be an American. Right off the bat, I think that should be a disclaimer before there's any disagreements that are explained. Now, here are my disagreements with some of the things that in the Women's March. One, I'm very, very pro-life, and the thing that turned me off, I'm going to leave it also as a note for future podcasts and everything. When I use this source, since we are terrestrial, I can't have it up on the screen. I will leave the link to the article or the source that I'm quoting in the comment section or in the description of the video, just as a note for you guys listening. So, I'll have the link for this in the below. Pro-life groups have been banned from the Women's March. They were not allowed in, and that's concerning to me. 47% of women in the United States are pro-life, and abortion is one of the few. It's one of the few real things that I don't like to move on. It's one of the few issues that I don't like to kind of, think about even-handedly, because it's such a moral absolute, in my opinion. So the Women's March didn't allow pro-life women in the march, which to me is disconcerting, because at the end of the day, you have people marching for many different reasons, whether it's domestic violence, rape. This is the interesting thing about the march. You have people protesting Donald Trump, but you also have people who doesn't love women's rights. If you asked anybody off the street, would you join a march for women's rights? They would say yes, because everybody believes in women's rights. It's just fundamental. So when you talk about women's rights and say, use abortion and say women's rights means abortion or means government-funded birth control, then that's when people start disagreeing with you, So I want to make something clear that I think that it's a bit unfair that you have something as blanketed as something named as a blanketed statement as a women's march, and then you're not going to allow slightly varying viewpoints. I mean, there's a couple pages I've seen called it's feminists that are pro-life, so they agree with mainly every other liberal kind of narrative or viewpoint, but at the same time they're pro-life, and those types of people weren't allowed. So and then on top of it, you have a couple other problems with the Women's March. You had black people in the Women's March vilifying white women, because white women 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump, and so you had that disconnect. And again, I find it sad that just because of just because of the color of their skin, they were, they're tearing each other apart. It's pretty pathetic to be completely honest. And then on top of it, you have a couple other things that are not as important, but still kind of hypocritical or contradictory. You have on the website I was looking at, it said it was talking about how let me pull it up real fast. Hang on 1 second. We support the advocacy and resistance movements that reflect our multiple and intersecting identities. So when you talk about the resistance movements like that, and then the website goes on to talk about the Kingian ideas. I guess is it Kingian? Kingian, I guess? Yeah. Kingian? I don't know how you would say it. Kingian nonviolent tactics, it outlines. And then they go on, they say here that they support the resistance movements. Well, the resistance movements that are, punching Trump supporters in the face, that are burning limos and small businesses and trash cans and destroying the community and damaging private property, or do you support that, but you also at the same time want to say you're nonviolent? Interesting. Personally, I just find it to be disingenuous when you say these things and then you do another. So I have the article right here about what I was saying a minute or two ago about right here, New York Times, Women's March on Washington opens contentious dialogues about race. You have this black woman saying to a white woman, to white allies, quote, you don't just get to join now because you're scared too, meaning about Trump, quote, I was born scared, unquote. So this is the white lady that was kind of yelled at speaking here, quote, this is a women's march. We're supposed to be allies in equal pay, marriage, and adoption. Why is it about white women don't understand black women, unquote? So there's the difference right here between a conservative and a liberal. These are both liberal women, but my point is that liberals get so hung up with white privilege and everything that all of a sudden this white lady's opinion does not matter. This white lady's viewpoint on this issue does not matter, and they believe in the same things. And I think frankly, I think it's racially charged and it's unacceptable. She says, I get a lot of flack locally when I step down from white women who said that I'm alienating a lot of white women. Who they said, why do you want to be so divisive? So that was the lady that said that was the first coordinator of this march. A New Jersey woman wrote, I'm starting not to feel not very welcome in this endeavor. And so at the end of the day, is it really a movement for women, or is it just another liberal narrative being pushed? Because on top of it, I've seen some signs that are factually incorrect, like, oh, I hope one day that women have as many rights as guns do. Well, guns are regulated. You can't, you're a woman and you can walk into a voting booth. You can walk into a government building. You can walk into a school. You can walk into a movie theater. You can walk through an airport. I mean, you had to get checked for a gun, ironically, but you know what I mean? You're not guns. People have these delusional viewpoints on how society works, and on top of it, on top of that stuff, they double down. One of the coordinators had a tweet. I can't find it, unfortunately. I'll put it in the comments section. Like I said, that was talking about Sharia law and how it must be nice to live in Sharia law because you don't have to pay interest rates on your credit card. And so it's again pretty interesting that these people push women's rights and everything, and then at the same time this coordinator is talking about Sharia law, where yeah, sure, it might be nice to not pay interest rates on your visa, but at the same time, women's rape testimonies are worth half of that as a man, or even worse. Or gay people are being thrown off roofs, or women are being forced to dress how the law dictates. Okay, and so this is when you say stuff like that, and when you have another organizer who is linked to Muslim group that funded Hamas, I believe. Again, I promise I will put the link in the comments section. It becomes disingenuous. It becomes it becomes disagreeable. Something like, as easy as women's rights becomes disagreeable when you have all this stuff in it. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have Angelo Pizza. That is his real name. He's going to talk to us about the inauguration. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening. You are listening to Leveling Up with Steve Fera. That is me. Stay tuned. With Steve Fera. Tweet me at spfera26. Follow us at LevelHead Politics on Twitter and Facebook. You're listening to Leveling Up with Steve Fera. Right now I have Angelo Pizza on the line. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep.
And he is a classmate of mine at St. Joe's, and he was present at Donald Trump's inauguration, and he's got a lot to say about it. So, Angelo, what was it like being at the inauguration?
The feeling, it was just awesome. I've been a Trump supporter since day one, supported them through the primaries, and to be there with middle America, a lot of blue-collar, hardworking people, it was really a great energy in the air. Everybody, the majority of the people that I saw, they represent exactly what Trump's going for. The forgotten man, the people that can't afford to keep up with all the PC and everything that we're trying to force people to believe in. And it was just overall a great thing to see. And I feel like America's back.
Now, what do you think about his speech? Because he tried to. Now what you've said is kind of a reiteration of his main message for most of his campaign, that the unions and the Democrats have and overregulation of business has crippled the American worker and crippled the American the middle class and the working class, and his message is one that is hopeful, that we can bring back some of the prosperity that the American worker once had. And so, do you think that his speech resonated that? Because I know Chris Matthews called his speech Hitlerian. I don't know how to say it. Hitlerian, I guess.
Yeah, Hitlerian.
Typically the left wants to just say whatever he says is Hitler. But
Right.
What did you get out of his speech? Did you get that message? Did you get anything
else? No, obviously. They're going to keep pushing this Hitler message. It's a nationalist message. And nationalism, I'm tired of it being referred to as such a bad thing. Obama stripped us of any national pride that we had. Anything in our past, we have to be ashamed of for some reason, because, they want to say it was about oppression, it was about whatever. But at the end of the day, it's our history, and we don't have to be ashamed of that. So I think that what the message was generally was, let's come together as patriots, let's come together as Americans, and let's stop pushing all this divisive, who's black, who's white, who's gay, who's straight. That doesn't matter anymore. Let's just focus on business, focus on money, focus on what is going to make this country great again.
Right, and I can get behind that, and I think that like you were talking about nationalism, I think a good term to use is American exceptionalism, and that's something that Obama and the liberals are. Obama once said, he's like, of course you have American exceptionalism, but you have Greek exceptionalism, Italian exceptionalism,
right? Sure.
Other countries, but the thing is, when America first off, people focus too much on the negative things about America, and then about all the wars we've been in and everything. Even under Obama's term, our military it helps the most countries, builds the most houses, does the most for the entire world. It's the greatest peacekeeping force ever known to man. And on top of it, American business people and American, wealth from America is what is given in aid. There's trillions of dollars that are given to other countries
right.
in aid from America. And so that when we talk about American exceptionalism, and Rand Paul was talking about this, that $14 trillion was spent in foreign and domestic aid. No other country does that. You won't see any other country do that. And that's what we talk about when we say American exceptionalism. culturally, and on top of it, you have these European countries that you have. Oh, Bernie Sanders saying we need to be like Sweden, we need to be like all
It'll
these
never work. It'll never work.
all these Nordic countries. They're if you look at the population, it's hysterical because they're so homogenous and they have no
Right.
diversity. And we want to take a law that's working there and want to apply it here. America is so diverse and so different that under Obama, it's if nothing else, even if I'm not crazy about Trump, but if nothing else, you have to be grateful for the fact that now we have a president that believes that there's something special about America again.
Oh, exactly. I completely agree.
So, but let's keep going. So the protests.
Sure.
I have this article here from the Daily Wire. It's a conservative news website.
That's Ben Shapiro, right?
Yes, it is. He's one of my favorites. But anyway, it is the 11 worst protest moments from Inauguration weekend. So I'm going to go through a few of them, and I want to get your reaction.
All right, sure.
Because we have the limo on fire, which was, that was all over social media. We have protesters spat in the face of a cop, which is disrespectful, but not really. They were arrested for assault of a police officer and aggravated disorderly conduct. I don't know if spitting in someone's face is. I mean, were they a jerk and did they deserve to get arrested? Probably, but is that really assault? Who knows?
Is it one of the worst moments? Probably not. I heard there were a couple of police officers that.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they sustained a few head injuries and things like that.
Actually, where is it? It's right here. There's the limo. Well, here's the big thing was the deplorable. Did you hear about that?
I did.
So there were people, and I saw this on Facebook. It was a young man and his father, and a young guy was about our age was standing on the corner. He was just seeing what these protesters were talking about and saying. He wasn't even engaging them. And they saw him wearing, it didn't even say Trump on it. It was just some sort of like America hat. And they just started beating the hell out of him. And
right.
so,
yeah. No. It's disgusting.
Sucked in because he was trying to help his son and defend his son. So there was that. There was, what is it?
Well, hold on that topic right there. I think that says a lot about it, because it's not just about like people disagreeing with them. At this point, like you see it, it's blatant. They don't just hate those who disagree with them, but they hate any notion of patriotism. They don't want to see an American flag hat. You don't see any protesters waving an American flag. They obviously have an issue with the country, and they have an issue with people that are proud of the country in any way. So that's part of the reason that I'm happier than ever that the people that are actually proud of the country, that love the country, are back in power again. You see these people, I don't know what they want. They want a revolution. They want to start a new country for themselves. To me, it looks like terrorism. You're not even allowed to be proud of your country in the street with this mob coming through, burning things, hitting people, throwing rocks, attacking police officers. Our only form of defense are the police officers, and they're the ones being attacked. So I don't know what else to call it, really.
And those police officers, they could have voted for Bernie. They could have voted for Hillary Clinton. They're doing their job. These people that are out at Washington. So
they don't care.
So let me ask you something. Obviously, we had a Facebook discussion, and there were some other friends of mine that disagreed, that thought that believed that since the I guess you could call it like the people that got cheated out of the election, I guess. I don't know how to refer to these people the people that feel that they got cheated out of the election.
Right. The people chanting, this is what democracy looks like.
Right. So the people that are protesting, that feel like they got cheated, and they think that because they got cheated, because in their perspective, this is not real true democracy, that their candidate didn't win.
Right.
Do you feel that if Hillary Clinton won the election, do you think that the Trump supporters, maybe not like yourself, but Trump supporters in general, anybody that was a supporter of Trump would be acting this way?
If Trump lost fairly, I can guarantee there would be no protesters. And just based off of looking at history, when's the last time the right had a protest? I haven't seen a gun rights protest. I mean, there are very few. You see pro-life protests, but they're blown off as being, just crazy people, or they're given no respect.
Right. There was the March to Life protest just a couple days ago in Washington. It's every year they have this long giant protest or a march, through DC, and it was very rarely covered.
And for the record, when has that ever turned violent? Has there been a rock thrown at that? Are they attacking police officers? No, there's a clear difference.
Yeah, and abortion is the law of the land. I mean, right now you can legally get an abortion.
Right.
It's not like they're protesting. If there was if abortion was illegal, they wouldn't even be out there. And so
Exactly.
people protesting right now, pro-life, because they're worried of what will come. Well, we don't even know what's going to come yet. So, and then on top of it, like, do you think that anywhere in the United States, because there was always talk of hate crimes. There were some hate crimes that, like, there's, all these kind of bogus statistics that, like, like hate crimes against Muslims spiked after Trump won the election.
Right. They like to push that.
It turned out like a lot of these claims were either erroneous or false, or like there's been a lot of hate crimes against Trump supporters. So do you think
Right. And a lot of those hate crimes were perpetrated by the left. You see, like, these people spraying swastikas backwards. If it was a legitimate Nazi, I think they would know how to spray a swastika on a building. A lot of these people, they want to make it seem like there's this uprising of this dangerous alt-right movement, or whatever they want to push. But in the reality, we have some of the most peaceful people out there. Not to say that we have all peaceful people, or that there aren't racists on our side,
Sure.
but it's on both sides. And
Absolutely.
right now, the issue that's really driving the division in our country are these people that are in the streets rioting, burning things. We wouldn't think that we were divided if it weren't for those people.
Right, and okay, let's get back to the inauguration. So
Sure.
So you have the rioting, you have the protesting. Let me ask you, since you were there. So were you let's go through the day. So I know around 10 or 11 o'clock, that's when the ceremonies really started happening.
Right.
Go through like what happened during the day, and where did you see any protests, or if you saw the protest? So
Okay, so we got there around 5 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
There were no protesters when we got there, which is safe to assume because these people aren't getting up early for anything. Anyway, so we waited to get in. We finally got inside, and we were probably there around 7 a.m. We saw, actually probably a little earlier than 7, like 6 or so. Saw the sun come up, and we were in the same spot for hours, just talking to everybody. Everybody was very friendly, very nice. I didn't see any protesters until right after Trump was sworn in. There were a lot of people blowing whistles, just petty stuff like that. And then towards the end, when we walked out, we saw more protesters. And some of them, they're protesting Catholicism. Like, I don't even understand. There were signs like the Pope is the devil, and just very strange. They're strange people. And it kind of sucks that they're legitimized. And you don't see the crazies. You'll see a few people. You'll see the people that they can normalize in the media, but you don't see the guy dressed as Captain America with a turban on and a sign that says, like, I'm scared for my life or something like that. It just doesn't make any sense. They had an elephant blown up as a blimp on the way out. There was a train of people chanting, "This is what democracy looks like." My favorite chant, probably, because it makes absolutely zero sense.
right.
So they have an elephant blown up like a blimp, and it said racism on the side of it. I guess that means that Republicans are just racist. Like, let's just spread that far and wide, because that's the only way that we can bring them down at this point, I guess. So we walked through the protests. The people that we walked through were generally pretty peaceful, and that was it. Walking back after the inauguration, I can tell there was a completely different vibe amongst the police officers. They were smiling. People were thanking them. They were thanking people back. It was a much better air in the room as soon as he was sworn in, it was like something had changed.
So, did you get involved with any protesters, or did you just see them from afar?
And no, we walked like right through their march, and I was just waving my American flag, and I was like, I think this is what democracy looks like. I didn't go too much further than that because I didn't want to test how extreme they were.
Right, smarty. I know when I saw that you were going, I told you to stay safe. I'm glad you got home in one piece. Some Trump supporters weren't as lucky because you get going back to some of the protests. There was hang on a second. There's F Trump written on buildings and stuff. There was kids. There was this guy that went viral. This image. He got whacked in the back of the head and his
With a flagpole, right?
right with the flagpole. So that was amazing.
And I just want to say on top of this, I'm tired of being talked down to by these people. They talk to you like you don't know what democracy is, or like there's some type of
They're morally superior or something.
right. They're more sophisticated than you are, and then they go out in the streets and they act like this. I just don't understand where. Number one, I don't understand what they want. I'm watching the Women's March today. Is there a law that they want passed? Is there something specifically that they want to have done? I'm completely just amazed by it. I don't know what they're protesting for
Right. Well,
or against.
From my perspective, it's complete self-aggrandizement. These people want to be out there. You see the imagery of like Martin Luther King and all this stuff, actually fighting for something, fighting against
Right, sure.
racist law. Show me a racist law. Show me a law that says women get paid 70 cents to men, 77 cents to $1 for a man. Show me a law that cops can go into these communities and kill these people.
Right.
Or that they can get off scot-free. Now, is there anecdotal evidence? Is there anecdotal incidences where some of these things might happen? Of course. But there's no epidemic of any of these things, any of these narratives that the left likes to push. And so when you have these people, they're going to riot, they're going to protest because they don't have an actual argument.
I don't know if they do think they're doing something productive, because I think at a certain point they're just anarchists. You have the people that are protesting, I think most of them really think that they're doing something. But when you see the rioters, I think there's a clear line where it becomes, I'm just hey, we're rioting. Let's just go crazy. Let's burn this. Let's throw a brick through this. It's a very primal instinct of just wanting pure anarchy that isn't seen normally. And in that Facebook argument earlier, the one guy said a false sense of pacifism, and I just don't understand, what does that mean? Like it's a false sense that we should be peaceful, that we should be civilized people.
And I refuse to believe. People are saying this that say oh, well, if Trump supporters are doing this stuff, you'd be justifying or oh, it is justified if Trump supporters would be doing it. Because
if Trump supporters were doing it, they would be called Nazis. It would be the beginning of the Nazi movement.
I refuse to believe that. It's a load of garbage that you think that anybody, just because they're upset, they feel stolen from, that they can do this sort of thing. It's unethical. It shows your lack of intelligence, and honestly, it proves that you're not willing to have an actual meaningful dialogue about these things.
It's not the way that Americans act. You see in very poor countries where things are just completely, they're so downtrodden that they have no other option, or they're so uneducated that they have no clue what they're doing, but that they'll create chaos, or they'll form these groups to fight against the government. I mean, even ISIS, it's like a rebel group within all of these countries. So you see these people that are basically doing the same thing. They're a rebel group. They want to start a revolution. I just don't see where they're going to go from here. I don't know if they can ever go back to being normal citizens and acting like Americans.
Yeah, and then I agree with that, but you have this also, I've seen multiple memes from Occupy Democrats. I've seen all these different posts trying to compare it. There's a big term that people like us are using is private property, that you can't just destroy something of someone's just because you feel it meets your ideological, agenda.
Right.
And that goes for everybody. And you have this false equivalency between that and the Boston Tea Party, or the colonists during the Revolutionary War era. damaging property of the United Kingdom.
It's anecdotal, and it's a narrative that has been so artfully pushed by the liberal media that some people actually believe it, and you're never gonna make any progress when you want to believe that you're oppressed. You can't victimize yourself, because victimizing yourself only makes it more makes it harder on yourself to try to try to do better. You can't keep blaming others for the issues that you're faced with. You're never going to do anything. You're never going to get better if you continue to just perpetuate that cycle. Well, to quote another scholar, Ray Lewis of the Baltimore Ravens, they is you. And as illiterate as that sounds, the message that he is trying to put forth is you can't keep pushing they, because at a certain point you're limiting yourself. He said that after visiting Trump earlier this year, which he caught a lot of flack from in the black community. Mm-hmm. And it's just a shame that just trying to do better for yourself, Ray Lewis, he went to talk to Trump because he wanted to do better for his family, for other African Americans. He wanted to try to see what he could do for his people.
Just engage in a dialogue.
Right, exactly. And he was attacked for that.
It's honestly sad that from the perspective of the left, in many cases, I don't want to say all cases, but in many cases, I mean, who was it? It was Snoop Dogg that was calling the Talladega,
yeah.
Or University.
Talladega University, yeah.
The marching band that played, he was calling them, basically house Negroes or
right.
Uncle Toms for performing for a racist, air quotes. If you look at it objectively, it's a black student that's 18, 19, 20 years old and got to play an instrument which he probably had to practice for years and years and years and accomplish something. He's playing that at an inauguration of a president. I mean, that's an accomplishment. That's a life accomplishment to say.
It really is, and they're belittling them. Right, they're major celebrities that they probably look up to. Most of these students, they don't even support Trump. Really, I was listening to reading some quotes that they said, and they didn't sound like they were gung ho on the Trump presidency. They hope that he does well for the country. They just had a major opportunity and they took it, and now they're being demeaned by people that they might even look up to. It's something that I can't wrap my head around.
And I agree. Well, I think that is good for this episode. I will have you back soon, my friend, because we got to talk about some more stuff.
Excellent.
So, all right, it was great to have you, Angelo.
All right, thanks, man.
Yeah. Okay, we're back, and now I have with me Alec Palmer. He's the co-founder of LevelHead Politics. He's involved with Young Americans. Am I right in saying Young Americans for Liberty at Baldwin Wallace?
Yeah, we're starting a new chapter on campus. One of my friends from school actually is going to be the president, probably on an executive board. I'm waiting to see where I'm going to be on, but some promise to that too, for sure. Cool,
awesome. And so I have him on right now. So first off, since it's the first podcast, why don't you tell me and everybody who's listening what's the goal of LHP?
Yeah, so first, Steve, thanks for having me on here. I know this is kind of our dual venture, but, thanks anyways. So LevelHead Politics, I don't know if any of our listeners have read anything about the history or anything, but really it started from a couple kids who were just kind of getting agitated with an echo chamber almost, and it was over like a Facebook argument, ironic enough. But basically we wanted to move more towards a center and not so much be a centrist, but more just be able to talk about both sides civilly. I think that's a word. But civilly and intelligently, because there's so much, and we'll get to this later in the podcast, but there's so much animosity and so much rivalry between the political sides right now where you can't even talk about anything, any issue without saying, well, my side believes this, your side believes this. So that's the goal of LevelHead, is to really just hone in on the facts and things like that, so we can get to the middle and say, you can have your opinion, but this is what's really going on, so form your opinion on that, rather than just listening to places like Fox News as a religion or CNN as a religion, and just taking their talking heads as gospel.
Yeah, and I think it's a great endeavor because with Trump and Clinton and Bernie Sanders and everybody, you have such a polarizing political sphere going on right now in the U.S. So it's great to have a place where people can talk like that, because we have writers at LHP, we have writers that write very good things about Trump, we have people that write very bad things about Trump. And,
Exactly.
And so that's the idea that we just present the facts, we present what's going on in a unbiased way, as unbiased as we can be. It's hard not to be unbiased, but
Sure.
And I think it's very admirable, and I'm happy to be with you guys. So
Yeah, we're happy to have you on.
So let's get down and dirty. So how about what's going on with all this Trump stuff? What do you make of all the protesting and everything?
So just kind of be transparent. In the primaries, I'm a registered Republican, and I voted for John Kasich. And then in the general, I wrote in Evan McMullen for Pennsylvania. And that was really more along the lines of, I didn't feel strongly about Trump, and I just know I didn't like Hillary, and I didn't feel like that was a good enough reason for me to vote for Trump, was just because I hate Hillary. So just that's more for transparency reasons. But I don't really have too strong of an opinion on Trump. I think he says a lot of good things, and you take the good with the bad. He said disgusting things about women, and some really just controversial things about minorities and different situations where he's more reactionary and just goes to Twitter, which can either help you in where he voted in his fan base or voter base, which I think helped him a lot, just going straight to Twitter and being reactionary.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that helped him a lot, but it also turned a lot of people off who are more educated in the issues. And not saying Trump voters aren't educated at all. There's some very, very, very educated Trump voters. But people who read into the things and really try to get the facts, it's harder to veer towards him. So in general, I'm happy he won. I guess because I'm happy that Hillary lost. I think she would have just been more of the same, and I think this was a vote for change rather than a vote for Trump or a vote for conservatism. And that's one of the things that angers me the most is I see so many people on, whether it be Fox News, The Hill, Heritage, wherever you see it, where they're like, oh, well, Trump was a win for conservatives. He's not. He's not a conservative. He has opinions all across the board. All he is he's changed from whether or not you liked Obama. It was 8 years of the same. And this is a change. And a lot of people were hurt through Obamacare and different regulations and attacks on the economy and attacks on different manufacturing jobs and different places like that, especially in middle America. And that's why you saw the blue wall come crumbling down, where these jobs of auto industries, steel, coal, and like my home state of PA went red since I think Reagan. That was insane. I mean, I made a
Wisconsin.
Exactly. I mean, who would have thought? And it's easy to attack Hillary saying, "Well, shoot, I went there," but who would have thought that those three states would have went red? They haven't went red in 30, 40 years. That would be like a Democrat saying, or a Republican barely goes to Texas because they know they're going to win Texas. It's like that.
Hillary didn't think to go there because she thought she had those votes locked in, but a lot of those people like you're saying, these working class, blue collar, middle aged white men that are so privileged to have been laid off during Obama's last 8 years. They're just angry with the Democrats and they want economic change. And Trump, while are Democrats more pro-union than Republicans? Of course, but Trump's better for small business. He might be better. He might be better for unions. I mean, you even have Kevin O'Leary now, who's running in Canada. That's saying he wants to work with the unions and make the Canadian worker be more successful. But anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent. All the stuff you just said was great, and I agree with a lot of it.
Sure.
I do want to say, what do you make of all the protesting?
Yeah. So I do want to separate the protesting from the Women's March or the Trump movement, because I think they're all separate entities. Because the Women's March, like a lot of things that happen, I think it was under good intentions originally. Things like Obamacare or like the Wounded Warrior Project got in trouble for some ethical issues. And I think a lot of things end up turning out poorly because they had good intentions and then they got hyperinflated by bureaucracy or whatever. But I think when I think of the protest, I have some stats here, that some early estimates from the Women's March. Across the nation, about 3.7 million people marched, which, regardless of what you think about it, that's absolutely remarkable. I mean, to put it like this, 1 out of every 100 Americans were involved in that march, which is insane. But so even though it was remarkable, you look at places like the Huffington Post, like CNN, the traditionally liberal media sources, and they're praising how great it was. Then you look at Fox News and traditional conservative side, and they're saying, well, how terrible it was. Well, we can do that, but I think there's a line in the middle, because there were people there who had valid points, where people who were marching for women affected by domestic violence, women affected by rape, women affected by actual issues that do harm women. And regardless of what you think, abortion is a hot topic for women, because for obvious reasons. But there were people there, just like people who were at the inauguration, who showed up in knowing that all they wanted to do was just protest and hate Trump and scream about Trump, which that is, I think, the total wrong place to do it, because you're diluting the message of the women who actually had a gripe. And, if you were there saying, I don't like how Trump talks about women. Okay, valid. You can take what he said as an attack on women. That's perfectly fine. But if you're there just saying, I hate Trump, and then you just scream at people because they might not hate him as much as you, that it completely discredits everyone there. Because if you're a part of it, you might be one out of the 50 people around you who think that way, but from an outsider, that's how all those 50 people look, because you're the only person they interacted with. And I think that kind of leads into our political climate, where you look at how people treated Trump voters, where they're called deplorable, racist, homophobic, misogynistic, the same 3 names that everyone got called. And you could say that that's why Trump won the election, but I saw a video earlier today about a guy who was taking Women's March supporters one-on-one, toe-to-toe, just saying, you can't just call people names. You can't just tell them they're stupid. You can't just sit there and say, you don't really matter because this, or this, because that's what people do. They'll support them in the voting booths. They don't have to tell you their political opinions. They could lie straight to your face and say they like Hillary. But when they go into that voting booth, all it is them and that screen or that paper. And that's one of the reasons where, and we can get to this till later, so we can focus on the protest. But the political climate is just absolutely disgraceful right now.
I have this theory that there's all these Hollywood elitists that I have this theory that they all vote Republican.
Well, it's funny.
I just think it just makes the most sense that they're just doing this to pander to all these liberals and the PC culture. It just makes so much sense to me. But anyway, I agree with what you're saying. And earlier in the podcast, I was talking about the Women's March a little bit, and I was saying how, it is remarkable, and I think it is. It's a beautiful thing that you have a country where so many people can come and protest. They're not protesting really; they're just demonstrating. And I have no problem with the fact that they're demonstrating. I think that they did so peacefully, and that's admirable. I do have some qualms with the messages that are being spread. And some of them are, abortion is a totally different topic, but at the end of the day, I was mentioning earlier, you have women that were pro-life that were excluded from the march, and you can still be for, last I checked, you can still be for women's rights if you're against the killing of babies. At least that's where I come from, that's a thing. And on top of it, you had women that were, these women were tearing each other apart. You had, let me pull up the article here. I was saying earlier, it was from the New York Times. It was the dialogues about race, where black protesters that were women, female African Americans, were telling white women that they need to check their privilege and they shouldn't be at the event. oh, now you're just learning what it's like to be oppressed. Like we've been born into this.
Hmm.
Like, you don't have a right to have an opinion on this. And I think that's like, it's just Marxist bullcrap. And it's sad. I feel sad for these people because these people are, these women that are marching and men too that are marching and they're doing everything they think is right. That is prescribed to these beliefs, be part of the group think, and then on top of it, they still get vilified, and they're still not. It's still not enough.
Exactly. And to add on to that, I think, you look at the biggest protests and demonstrations in history, and they were all for one issue. You even go back as far to the Boston Tea Party. Yes, it was a revolt, a start of a revolt against a tyrannical government, but it was because of the tea tariff. It was because of the Tea Act. And then you look at like the Vietnam demonstrations, anti-Vietnam War. They were protesting against the Vietnam War. And yeah, they probably did.
Topic.
Exactly.
All over the place. And let me pull up the website. What I
Mm-hmm.
have here, it's womensmarch.com for those of you listening. And I talked earlier about how I'll mention that to you in a second. The advocacy for the resistance movements. But,
Sure.
right here. Hang on one second. Here it is. We stand together in solidarity with our partners and children for the protection of our rights, our safety, our health, and our families.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes on to say, the rhetoric of the past election cycle has insulted, demonized, and threatened many of us, immigrants of all statuses, Muslims, and those of diverse religious faiths, which is clearly, I mean, just say Muslims, and we all know that those of diverse religious faiths is just filler there. No one's attacking the Sikhs or the Jadists. People who identified as LGBTQIA, Native American or Native people, it says, I guess indigenous, Black and brown people, people with disabilities, blah 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 blah. Our communities
I think
are and scared, etc. So it's not. Is it really for women? It sounds to me like it's just some compilation of all these different leftist
Yeah.
narratives.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note because they call it the Women's March, and it gives it a very eloquent name, and it's hard to attack something called the Women's March because the first thing you think of, it's for women. I don't want to attack something for women, but it was really just basically a cornucopia of issues into this protest. If you had a gripe, you could just go and say you were marching there. And I think that, like I said earlier, I think that diluted the message that they were trying to get past where, yeah, you can say Trump said this about women, but there's a difference between arguing one thing he said or one policy he has or et cetera, but versus just attacking him just because he's him. And I think that's what ended up, this devolved into was just, if you have a gripe, come and protest, and we're just going to have a giant protest against the president, which then again is fine, but don't mislead people to say, well, it's only about women. Just say, let's protest against Trump, because, as upsetting as as upset a lot of people would be because of that, that's perfectly valid in our country. You can protest a president you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, exactly.
All good. I thought I couldn't tell if you were done speaking or if it was like lagging out. But anyway.
No, you're good.
All right, cool. So I have another article here too. I was talking about this earlier, that Women's March organizer recently met ex-Hamas operative, has family ties to terror group.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is this another example of the hypocrisy of this? Because I've just read that blurb to you from the website about basically saying that we march for Muslims as well. And to me, I thought Sharia law was very anti-women. So wouldn't that be an important goal of the Women's March to address?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think I saw the article somewhere. I'm not sure the site, but I think that it is hypocritical where you're marching against oppression of women while simultaneously supporting a group or an ideology that oppresses women. But I also think that if you look far enough, where any political establishment, you're going to find ties to certain groups that are terrible. I mean, Donald Trump was endorsed by David Duke of the KKK. I mean, you can talk about all these different connections, and I think there's a certain thing to be said where does it actually mean that they agree with that or whatnot? Because people argued that Trump now supports the KKK, but then people were like, well, no, he doesn't. But can we make that same argument with the leader of the Women's March meeting with Hamas? And is it a different situation? Is it the same situation? I think that's something we need to look at. Are we making mountains out of molehills, or are these things that need to be addressed and need to be pushed into light, into mainstream?
And I think that you know, it's a fascinating thing to talk about the East versus West dichotomy. And
Mm-hmm.
like, women would in these march would probably say like, oh well, those women in those countries suffer a different kind of oppression, and we're marching for the oppression that women face in the
Sure.
West. And I think the whole point of talking about the East and everything is saying like, if you look at the oppression in the East on women and gay people and all the people that you claim to want to be marching for, it kind of makes the air quotes oppression in America and everything feel insignificant. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
here, let me go back to the website for just a moment. It says right here that we want women's rights are human rights, and we will not rest until women have parity and equity in all levels of leadership in society.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't. Can you think? What do you say to that? Do you think that
Yeah.
women still face trouble to gain leadership positions in America or UK?
So before I jump on that, I did want to add something to before you were saying East versus West oppression. I do have an interesting theory that I've kind of developed over time. Where honestly, it started in high school. We were reading a book called The Kite Runner, and every day it was about oppression and that, and I think it's called A Thousand Splendid Suns, and it is basically about oppression and what happens in these countries is from a first person point of view. And we talked a lot about this oppression and what we can do, what happens. And I definitely agree that there's the oppression there needs to be stopped. But you also have to look at it from their scope. Where we're looking at it from a completely Western outsider scope, where, well, yeah, that's bad. This is so bad. But from their side, that's culturally accepted and the cultural norm. Where oppression against women in the West, where we are, it's not a culturally racism and things are not culturally accepted. Whether people scream that at marches or not, it's not a culturally accepted. If you walk down the street, start screaming racist things, you're probably going to get screamed at, beat up, arrested, something like that, where it's going to cause a problem. But there, if a male hits a woman, no one's going to bat an eye. They are completely covered. And we will never know. I mean, we'll have the anecdotal stories come over where these women are protesting or doing something against their cultural norms of being covered and not being able to do anything by themselves. But there's also a lot of women who don't even know anything different. And I think that's an important distinction we need to have. Are we using our Western scope to make us feel better, or I guess if you want to say make us feel better about ourselves? I mean, if you want to call it that, that's perfectly fine, because we do have, in the honest sense of the word, we do have a lot of American privilege over the rest of the country or the rest of the world, and just purely because of well, we are the greatest country on the earth. We're free. Yeah, there are other countries are free, but everyone pales in comparison to how we run our country.
Right.
And good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, just to touch on a couple things there, you bring up multiculturalism, and it's
Mm-hmm.
funny how, it's interesting how you see, like, that, women in many of these areas may not feel oppressed, even if they are being oppressed. And
Exactly.
maybe not even from our perspective. I think objectively there are some things that are happening in those countries, and when I say those countries, I am talking about the Islamic world.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some things in those countries that are happening to women that are objectively bad. That are objectively.
Oh, I agree. 100% agree.
Things that should not be allowed in a modern society.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you have a blending of that culture and the Western culture, where look at Germany. Like, look what happens in Germany. Look what happens in England.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's just really fascinating that things that women are protesting about in America, women in the Middle East wouldn't even have the privilege or the opportunity to even be able to protest or even be able to talk about those things.
Or to even have the opportunities that women are protesting against. Even having a job or going to the market by themselves.
See, that's what I'm saying. That women are protesting for equality in America, but from a Middle Eastern perspective, America might symbolize gender equality.
Yeah, and I think going along with that is there's no doubt in my mind, and if you don't agree with this, I don't think most people would disagree, but there's a lot of imperfect things in America. There's racism still. There's sexism still. There's always going to be, and I think that's just a natural part of life. But yes, we can minimize it. We can help these, I guess if you want to call them underprivileged or oppressed communities where there's still people who hire based on skin color, and that's something that affirmative action, once again, a good intentioned program has devolved into kind of a political football where you can say, well, it's bad or good, but there's things that need to be done. But I also think that we don't need to make it something as big as the civil rights movement. That was a huge cultural shift through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where it took us hundreds of years to get to that point where we can actually switch a whole mindset of a country to have the majority believe in integration and multiculturalism rather than segregation. And I think that's something where it's not going to be tomorrow where we're going to switch that. There has to be generations of that mindset go through. But I think we're making progress, and there's still progress to be made. But we also need to be cognizant of the fact that we're the most advanced country in the world. We might not have the fastest computers, the fastest internet, but we are, as a whole, the number one country in the world.
Right, and I think a big difference between Black Lives Matter and the Civil Rights Movement was that the Civil Rights Movement was directly protesting laws that were on the books and government that was democratic, by the way, controlled, that were creating these injustices. Sure. Well, it was great having you on, Alec. It appears we ran out of time, so I'm going to have you on back soon.
Sure.
So do you want to put in a little bit of plug for LHP real fast?
Yeah, so you guys can go to our website, lhpolitics.com. You can go to our Facebook page, like it. We're growing there. Also go on to our SoundCloud, and you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. It should be up relatively soon, so definitely subscribe to that. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, go to our website, share it around, because we're trying to change media as it is, and we're small now, but we have big goals. So yes, thanks, Steve, for bringing me on.
Absolutely, and it's at LH Politics for Facebook, Twitter, basically everywhere. All right. Trying to find new advertisement opportunities for your small business, group, or webpage? Advertise with LevelHead Politics for less money than you would spend on a Netflix subscription. For just $7 a month, you receive the complete package. A block ad on our website, a commercial on this podcast that I'm doing right now, and more. Advertising partnerships with us are no strings attached and no tricks up our sleeve. It couldn't get any more simple. You pay, we display. Contact us now and we'll give you the first month free. That's right, the first month free. You get advertising on our website and podcast free for a whole month before you pay a cent. Contact us now at levelheadpolitics@gmail.com. That's levelheadpolitics@gmail.com, or message us on Facebook at LHPolitics. LevelHead Politics, fair, direct, and factual. Welcome back. So thank you for listening to the first, I guess you could say the inaugural LevelHead Politics podcast, Leveling Up with me, Steve Fera. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at LH Politics. Follow us on Twitter at LH Politics. You can follow me on Twitter too if you want to at SPFera26. Fera. Don't forget to just spread the message. Not just our message. You just political correctness and its response, which is the alt-right, have really done a lot of damage to civility and political discourse, to honesty in the media, to just general, I think Ben Shapiro put it best when he said, act like a mensch, when he was talking about the protesters, the rioters, I should say, in Ferguson. I think that should go for everybody. Act like a mensch. Act like, you're in that person's position. Okay? Don't be so quick to judge. And be very open to different ideas and different perspectives. And that's the whole point of this website. That's the whole point of this podcast. And I hope you enjoyed it. So I know we didn't get there was a lot of discussion in this podcast. This is really a pilot episode. You're gonna hear more stuff from me personally. You're gonna hear more debunking of things. You're gonna hear more lists. Let me leave you with one last thing. Every podcast, Ronald Reagan is my favorite president, and every podcast I'm going to leave you with a quote from Ronald Reagan. And so I'm going to start with this because it fits the message. And this is Paul Ranley from a book. This is Ronald Reagan from a commencement address at Eureka College in 1982. And it says, "Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with conflict by peaceful means." So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking part in our goals and taking part in this movement we're trying to create. And I hope you can tune in with us next week. The podcast will be released every Monday. Not at a specific time, but every Monday. I promise you it'll be every Monday. So let me give you a sneak preview for next week. Next week we're going to have Nathan Apodaca. I hope I'm not butchering that. He can correct me when he comes on. He is involved with he is a student like me at a university, and he is involved heavily with a pro-life group, and we're going to talk about abortion. And I might have my father on, who has been in the healthcare industry for about 25 years, and we're going to talk about Obamacare. So thank you for listening again, and please don't forget to look up some of our great content on our website. We have some really talented articles from our writers. An article just came out today by Rachel Klein, who examines what we need to do during the Trump presidency to, quote, survive, or as she puts it, quote, live. So don't be afraid to check that out. Please give us a like, give us a share, and thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us. Please stay safe, and we'll see you next week. You've been listening to Leveling Out with Steve Fera from LevelHead Politics.